Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, July 20th, and this is the Moscow City Council regular meeting. With that, Wayne?
Welcome everybody here tonight, and would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Wayne. The next thing on the agenda will be the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I'd make a motion to accept the consent agenda and note that we did change the minutes on page 5 of 8. Just there was a scrivener's error, a little bit of punctuation and grammar that needed change. So we've got the hard copies up here, and I would imagine that will be online, if not already, shortly. So
I would second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Dan and a second by Art to approve the consent agenda with the correction to the minutes on page 5 of 8. I'll start the roll with Walter.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next thing, which will be item number 2, Gary, staff recognition. Gary Reedner.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm pleased tonight to recognize the city's fleet department, which was honored by Government Fleet Magazine, and this is the site. The Government Fleet Magazine Leading Fleets program recognizes fleet operations that are leading the industry in innovations, ideas, and the way they face challenges. The purpose of the award is to drive industry toward thinking about lean fleet leaders. It recognizes those who are working to change their own fleets and their industry for the better, those who are thinking beyond the status quo. The City of Moscow Fleet Division was recognized largely for the Eco-Driver program, low-use reviews, comprehensive replacement program, and stringent specification and inspection processes. We're especially proud of this recognition as the vast majority of the recognized fleets are from cities far larger than ours with huge budgets and abundant resources. So, I'd ask Tyler Palmer and Rick Benjamin. Who else do we have here? Oh, Carl and Tammy, come forward, please. Mayor, if you come down. And I'm sure Tyler will have an eloquent thing to say when we're all done. Easier to step forward and focus. Okay, thank you.
No flash. Dang.
We appreciate having a moment with the mayor and council. Appreciate Gary taking a minute for the staff recognition. It's a nice portion of the meeting, and it's great to be able to recognize the hard work of our staff. I can't personally take very much credit for this at all. This is an award that Rick and his staff really worked hard toward. As was mentioned, it's one of the smaller fleets that was recognized, and that's a big deal. You know, when we've got a small fleet, a lot of times it's just treading water, trying to keep your head above. And so the fact that these guys work so hard and that they've worked to innovate and shown that can be done in a small setting is really impressive. And you know, Rick in particular has stepped in for a longtime employee, John Smith, and it's always great when we have internal talent that is willing to take up the torch the way that Rick has. And he's really, rather than, you know, when you do have succession, you're hoping that you can just continue with the momentum. And Rick, in the short time that he's been in running the fleet department, he has really worked to innovate even further and to improve our processes. We're at a point now where we're more caught up than we've been at any point in the history of our fleet. We've had some projects where we've done some minor construction projects on the shop to improve efficiency, and things are just really going well. We've got Tammy that's the glue that keeps the whole thing together. We've got Carl here with us tonight. Mike is on vacation and couldn't be here, but we've got a really great fleet department, and we really appreciate the opportunity to recognize them, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Tyler, and Rick and team. Kudos to you folks for doing a wonderful job, and that's just a section of the staff that makes us all proud. Thank you very much. Bravo. Okay, we will move on to item number 3, which is public comment and mayor response period for 15 minutes. Those in the Audience can come up and speak as long as it doesn't pertain to things or issues that are on tonight's agenda or something that's before a Board of Adjustments or P&Z. And please state your name, even though we know who you are, Victoria, and your address, please.
Victoria Seaver, 121 North Lily, Moscow. So I just wanted to back my email to you this morning with a few comments regarding the 2016 budget process. So I've been an observer in the 3 public workshops you've had, and I've picked up comments that you guys have made in meetings where you've referred yourself back to the strategic planning process, and that's a good thing. That's cool. I did my own rankings of the 29 major challenge areas to compare to yours after the 3rd workshop, and from what I absorbed in the information I got from your discussions and what I felt I knew. And then I went back through my rankings with the strategic rating list right next to it. I thought I had it all in my head just right. And then I went through with the guidelines, said, that changed my priorities a little bit. So I found the process very useful. So just as I did with the 2013 and 2014 goals that you had set, I will be referring back to the priorities that you've set and the reasoning behind them as you go about gelling things for the next year. The budget takes work, and it takes even more work to put into place a consistent and integrative approach from all the various departments, the staff, and the council to make the most of all the critical of the criteria. And I want to encourage you in utilizing the strategic planning process while you work through the budget and manage it through the next years, because the effect goes through a number of years. And I want to encourage the citizens out there to communicate with you about the budget before the hearing date of August 17th so that you are able to fully take in their thoughts. It's our job to not wait till the last second and to not just after the fact say something. So I want to thank you for your hard work and the dedication to our city's welfare.
Thank you, Victoria. And you really hit something that is, I think each council person up here, as well as myself, would love to hear from folks out there in the public, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve and what they think. It's an important process for all of us. And the strategic plan and priority-based budgeting that we're doing, that's going to be an ongoing process. It's just not a one-year thing. We're going to keep the thing working and moving together, and we feel like we've really made some progress with that. So thank you for your comments. Are there others that would like to come up? Come on up, sir. Please state your name and address for us.
My name is Gene Buckles, and I live at 1702 Union Flat.
Hold the microphone up if you would, Gene. There
Is that
you
better?
go.
Thank you, Gene.
My name is Gene Buckles, and I live at 1702 Union Flat Road in Pullman, or south of Pullman, about 10 miles. I came here initially to speak regarding the farmers market policies concerning buskers and other performers. However, after doing some more research and discussing it with my wife, we said this is not the venue for that. But I still wanted to come for this reason. I was involved in a discussion on Saturday with Kathleen Burns and David, I'm sorry, I can't remember.
David Pierce.
With another busker. That could have easily turned into a shouting match. I wanted you all to know what fabulous people you have working for you. Kathleen was just marvelous during this time. She handled that situation so well. As I said, what could have turned into a shouting match was handled very well. And I went off and then performed as a busker for the next couple of hours, and my wife wandered around the market and talked with various people, and we were so impressed with the way it was handled. So, and then after also at my performing and being involved more in the market, we're newcomers here, by the way. We've lived here less than 2 years, and we found we both fully agreed with the policies that are laid out, and wanted to reaffirm what the commission that I found out exists has done, and all the work that they did, I'm sure, over the years to get these regulations and recommendations settled. So thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, David. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Buckles.
Appreciate it.
Additional comments before we move on? Okay, thank you. We will move on to item number 4, which is the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport Grant Agreement. Gary Riedner will be presenting. Gary, you have the podium, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. No, I'm not Elisa Anderson, who is supposed to be handling this. Since it is a grant, Lisa generally handles grants for the city. We have Kevin Mulcaster with Mead & Hunt, who's a consultant for our airport realignment project, and Tony
Bean.
Bean.
Doesn't get any better, Gary. Sorry.
Hey, I've got stage fright. Tony Bean, our executive director of the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport. What you have before you, Tony and Kevin are prepared to give a presentation today. There was a variation of that presentation, which was given last week at the regional breakfast meeting, quarterly regional breakfast meeting at the University in Best Western. Several council members and the public weren't there to see that, so it's a pretty good presentation as to the background on the airport project. What you're being asked to do tonight is to approve a resolution that is necessary to be executed by the sponsors of the airport, two sponsors, City of Moscow and City of Pullman. That resolution is to accept FAA funding in the amount of $16 million, $1 million of entitlement and $15 million of discretionary funding that has been granted to the airport for their realignment project. The match on that grant is 8.125%, which, as you know, and we've reported in the past, was the result of some change in legislation that we were able to obtain through our federal congressional delegation for both Idaho and Washington this past winter and spring. So this is the first phase of what was estimated originally as an $89 million project. It is a 5 to 6 year project. There will be construction inflation. So the top end of that project could go as high as $119 million. We are in the process of obtaining obligations or pledges for assistance in the match portion. City of Pullman has pledged $2.5 million from their side. You have in the 2015 budget and in the 2016 proposed budget have pledged $202.5 million at $500,000 a year to be paid $250,000 with tax revenues every year, $250,000 as an interfund borrowing that will then be repaid by after 5 years from those same $250,000 of annual taxes. The first phase of the project, which is the grant that you'll be looking at today, is to realign the project. Phase 1 includes land acquisition, wetland mitigation, utility relocation, and grading. I think Tony and Kevin's presentation will explain the magnitude of those improvements. City of Pullman indicated, as they did at our quarterly breakfast meeting, that they, at their meeting tomorrow night, will consider and hopefully pass a resolution which will commit their funding and put the form of that funding through their treasury to the airport for the airport board's use in that project. So with that, there's one other aspect that I wanted to point out that you will see in the CCSR. As Tony and Kevin will both tell you in a few moments, the airport funding, the FAA funding, is very similar to ITD funding and the old FTA funding that we received for highways. And at the end of the year, if there are projects that other jurisdictions have put in for and those projects are not ready to go, even though funding has been allocated, what the agency will do is sweep that funding, and essentially it has to be spent in that budget year. So if the entity is not ready to move ahead with their project, the granting agency, in this case the FAA, will make that funding available for those projects that are ready to go. There is an additional $14 million that was requested in this phase of the grant. That is above and beyond the discretionary funding that was originally awarded by the FAA. However, if it is possible that that funding would be available up to $14 million additional dollars, we would like the ability to access that funding as well, and that will require match for that as well. As I indicated, it is a fairly in-depth project. Tony and Kevin are well equipped to give their presentation, so I will turn the podium over to them and then ask you to consider the resolution. And then the second part of it will be the wetlands mitigation resolution after.
Dan has a question for you.
We don't have a resolution for the grant agreement, but we do for the wetland mitigation.
It's a grant agreement,
We just have
Gary.
approving the
sorry.
grant agreement.
I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. That's why I'm not a grants person.
And probably the same thing Walter was pointing out.
Exactly. Is that correct?
Walter, is that
Okay.
your?
Yeah, it's a grant agreement followed
Followed by a resolution.
a second item, which is a resolution.
Which is, yeah, part 9B.
Apologize for that. Okay, with that, I'd ask those gentlemen to come forward.
Mayor, Council, thank you for having me up here again. I'd like to give a brief presentation that was given Wednesday, as Gary alluded to, so that you can get a better understanding of the history, the background, kind of what's going on with the project, and then we'll go through what's happening right now and then take the questions that the council may have. I like this quote. I don't know how many in the public have actually seen it. This is a quote from an article that is titled, How to Fire Your Airport Manager. Because if I'm not doing this, something's probably wrong. If I don't believe this, and the airport board that you appoint on behalf for the Idaho side, and again, Pullman appoints on their behalf, but it talks about airports being communities' largest and most valuable public investment, that one that can or should play the biggest role in promoting long-lasting economic development and growth in the surrounding region. Your airport is your town's most important connection to the world. I believe that statement in a lot of cases, because airports are different than highways. Highways, the state has those, they fund them, they decide where they're going to go, how they're going to get there. The airport belongs to you. You decide. You decide what direction you want the airport to go in, what kind of services you want to have out there, what kind of destinations you'd like to have, and you let us know, and that's what we work towards. So you have direct control of that asset. It is yours. The board of directors sponsorship, what's happening currently, the benefits, the project itself, and then the funding sources, because that is the big thing we're working through right now, is how we're going to pay for this. I'm stealing from Mayor Lambert with this. He made a comment, so I put the picture up here. In the 1880s, if your town was in an area where you had rail systems, this is what you had. You had the train show up, and rail access gave you access to everywhere around the country, and you had a lot of commerce, a lot of business. If you didn't have rail systems, this is what it looked like. It dried up for a lot of towns. No transportation access means that you start gradually just losing your access to the goods and services in the area. And with the railroad, that was continental. With an airport, now it's global. The sponsors, Moscow and Pullman. The two cities are the sponsors as recognized by the FAA. However, the airport board is made up of both universities, Latah County, and then the Port of Whitman County is a non-voting funding partner. And those are the members, both mayors, sit as the chair and vice chair respectively, and the members of the board. I almost took this out, or took it out of one presentation one time, and somebody told me I really needed to bring it back because you don't really know what this looks like until you see this picture. That's what the pilot sees looking down the center line. They look right directly at Moscow Mountain. And when it's foggy and you can't see, that's not a good picture, when you know that's out there. So one of the things that they are trying to do with the realignment is move this point from here and move that runway to where it's in the lower area. So the whole runway is going to shift counterclockwise 5.5 degrees. But the problem that we have right now is aviation's grown up and they've gotten capacity discipline and price discipline, and shareholders not going to let the air carriers come off of that. They're not going to be flying routes that are not productive, and they're not going to be flying routes that are not profitable. So the airlines have learned the lesson that it's larger aircraft and less frequency. This airport was built in 1932, has been a partnership between the two cities for 80 years. And in World War II, it got really busy with different things that happened with training pilots and getting pilots trained for World War II. So when they designed the airport, they found a flat spot in the Palouse, and the biggest problem with that happened to be in the bottom of a creek bed. But it was flat. And those were small aircraft. Now with the advent of larger aircraft, the airport's grown over the years. In the 60s, there was a large expansion done on it, and I believe that it's been upgraded through the 70s and the 80s, and the 90s, we really started messing around with a lot of other stuff. But the problem is the taxiway and the runway are too close together. For the size of airplanes, we can only land a Q400, which is our aircraft that Alaska uses. It's the smallest aircraft in their fleet. But we're not sized correctly for that, and it's the smallest. So there is nothing smaller. If we don't have that, we don't have service, period. And so what the FAA has said is they would work with us to go through the planning process, the environmental process, and to realign our runway to meet safety standards and the separation standards between a runway and a taxiway. So currently what we do right now is to ensure that we have safety, we inconvenience everybody else. When we land a large aircraft, they take up the runway and nothing moves on that taxiway. Until that aircraft is made the way down the taxiway and it's parked on the ramp, then everything else can move again. You cannot operate like that permanently. The FAA has told us that we can't, and we're moving through that process to meet the standard. This is where aircraft go out of here. Blue's a pretty amazing place when you start thinking about global commerce. Whether it's garbanzo beans or wheat or research or education or technology, this region produces global impacts in a lot of different sectors, and it needs access to a lot of those things. So for quality of life purpose, if you don't have the access to those things, they find other places that they can be that will give them the access that they need. And currently, we're operating to the capacity that we can with our limitations. If we remove the limitations and go forward with keeping the service the way it is, it's not getting us to where we need to be as a region with the goals that both cities have and the region has and that you share. If we go forward and get it fixed, then pretty much the sky's the limit at that point. What do you want it to do? Instead of me telling you how all the ways that we can't do something, which I'm sure nobody really likes when staff comes up and says, well, we can't do this and we can't do this. You've got visions and goals and things that you want to see. I'd like to be able to say, yeah, we can do that. We can figure out how to do that. And it's a can-do attitude. That's a way that we've always operated, and that's the reason that we're here today. MedStar was a big impact on the Palouse. We didn't think it was going to be as large as it is. They're 1.5 to 2 flights a day, average. And they'll back up Spokane, they'll fly clean down to Grangeville. This is the Q400, our regular aircraft. And these are charters that we utilize for the athletics and to service the football teams as they come into both the University of Idaho and Washington State. They're a big splash on our economics because when that plane lands, those are meals, those are overnight rooms. If they're landing somewhere else, that's meals and overnight rooms that are going somewhere else. They're going to Lewiston or they're going to Spokane. History, 1970, there was a study for Pullman and Lewiston that was done in the 70s, and the results of the study was basically that the regional airport between the two areas was not going to happen. So the FAA dropped it. 1999, a master plan was done. 2004, there was a site investigation report to say, okay, let's start looking at some of these places. What can we do with this problem? Because now we have a problem. 2007, we started a master plan. to evaluate how many sites? 26 sites were evaluated to come up with 2 viable sites that were capable of getting that all-weather landing capacity and to get around the area where Moscow Mountain and those kinds of things are, to be able to get a pilot in here with bad weather and fog and those kinds of things. And then the other thing was, is it feasible to implement? What's the most cost-effective way that we can solve the problem? So the Phase 2 master plan identified a final solution, which is the alignment that we have now. It went through environmental assessment, was cleared last year. This year we are into an actual project. Well, we're done with the analysis portions of it. Now we're talking to pilots with Alaska Airlines and Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories and our general aviation folks and the FAA about how we're going to move forward and build a realigned runway that meets the requirements. The Vince Lombardi quote, I think it epitomizes the relationships that have existed as long as this airport has. Because this thing does not do itself by any stretch of the means. I can't do everything for it, and I don't know that any one partner can, but there's a lot of individual commitment to the group effort to get this done. And it makes it work. It's a wonderful thing to go to other areas and talk to other board members, and they ask the question about how Pullman Moscow works, and then when I tell them who the partners on the board are and that they actually function, and when we get a lot of things done, it's astounding to a lot of people, but it's normal for us because it's how we do a lot of things. There's 19,000 cities and towns in the United States, roughly. And out of that 19,000, or roughly 450 commercial airports, over 10,000 enplanements. That is a pretty astounding number. But then you start looking at Olympia, Salem, those are capital cities, do not have a commercial service airport. You have one, and a lot of the communities that if they lose commercial service, they spend everything that they can to try to get it back. And we want to make sure that we retain it for you. Vision's been a big piece of this. It takes effort. It takes commitment. We've had it. There is an excellent vision moving forward that's a unified vision. Project success requires specialized skills and relationships, and that's why we hire consultants. I don't know how to do all of the mathematics and the engineering it takes to do this, but I know there's people that are out there that do know how to do that. Not only do they know how to do the engineering portion of it, they can understand how to navigate the FAA to get it done. We're very happy to have Mead and Hunt and their partners take on the challenge of working with us to get the most efficient solution that we possibly can. Relocated runway, it's feasible to implement with what we currently have. One of the things that came up was, well, and it comes up again, is could we move the airport? You could. But if you move the airport, the FAA is only going to be a partner in a certain amount of that. St. George moved theirs, and they ended up having to pay out of their own pockets $33 million. It's very expensive. You'd have to recreate everything, hangars, terminal buildings, fuel systems, FBOs, all of that has to be recreated, and they're not federally eligible. So it was dismissed as a viable alternative because of the severe cost, and then the FAA's threshold of paying. If you can fix your problem for less funding, they're not going to take federal dollars that could go to other projects and put them into that. All-weather landing capability, there's some really great technology with the advent of GPS. They're able to land aircraft in situations now that it's unprecedented. It's never happened. Our particular problems today are when we get into the wintertime and the fog starts coming up, which happens here quite a bit through certain months, a couple of months anyway. From about November to January, we have cancellations, 90 to 120 a year. That's a month of cancellations on our current flight schedule. Our minimums for a pilot to be able to see the runway, the pilot has to see the runway from 500 feet up and 1.5 miles out right now. Alaska just put in for a private set of approaches with the FAA, and they were able to get those minimums down, if they're approved by the FAA, to 300. It's 375 feet on one end and 320 on the other, and 1 mile, which is significantly better than what we've had. When the runway goes in, the target is 200 feet and a half mile, which is completely unprecedented for anything that's ever been here. But with the terrain modeling and the capabilities with realigning the runway and optimizing it to get planes in here in inclement weather, that puts faith back into the system as far as the airlines are concerned and the communities, because right now there's a lot of people that make the choice in the wintertime to not even try to fly out of Pullman, Moscow. They're going to automatically go to Spokane or they automatically go to Lewiston. It's more convenient, but it's not more convenient because you have to take the gamble, and there's folks that don't want to take the gamble, and I can't blame them. But fixing this runway eliminates that worry for the people that fund, our region and require that capability. Business and hangar capacity, we're tapped out. There is not another place to build a hangar on that airport, not one. We're building 2 of them this year, and that maxes everything out. There's demand for it, but there's not area for it. Aeronautical support to the region, MedStar. There are capabilities that are out there that we'd like to pursue that we've been asked about, such as cargo and some other things, because we generate a lot of those business needs. And if their capacity and the capabilities are here, when a business is evaluating communities as far as where do they want to locate, that becomes a very important consideration. Destinations and routes become possible. Could we fly to Salt Lake, Denver, Minneapolis, Portland, L.A., pick a city? That becomes a very possible means at that point, because we can go ask for anything. But right now, it's hard to go ask an airline when you've got an airport that doesn't meet required standards for the FAA. Well, can you come in here and do this? That you're hampered coming out of the gate to even bother with the ask. When you've got the standards made, then you can go back on the merits and say, okay, well, our community really needs this, and this is where we go. Is there some interest in getting service to this city and whatever the priority of the region is going to be? That becomes a possibility, where right now it's just not a very good one. Economic impacts, the 2 state studies roughly are $25 million existing is how they've come out. We've got a request for proposals out. We want an updated study as the airport board specific to the airport and this project, so we can hand it to the elected officials that are looking at this and make decisions in the region and say this is really what it is. But we're trying to get really hard numbers so we can satisfy those questions. It's got real commitments. It's a feasible project. 7,100 by 150-foot runway. That lands up to a Boeing 737 legally, where we could have service with up to a 737. I don't think we're going to have 737 need anytime soon, but with Alaska Airlines currently, our market's been untagged. We are no longer, after August 23rd, the plane is not going to land in Lewiston and then come to Pullman. Pullman will have its own flights with Moscow, and Lewiston will have its own flights. Separate from that, I think in the case where we have direct flights to Seattle, the first flight in the morning will go out at 6 a.m. However, on the other side, Lewiston is going to be able to provide Boise service direct at 6 o'clock in the morning and get back. It's something that we'd like to have up here. We can make the pitch for that at a later point, but that is where the airline has decided to move service. So Boise will forego an early flight to Seattle Lewiston will forego that early flight to Seattle. If they want to go to Seattle, they got to come up here. And on the flip side, Boise, you have to go down there. You could still fly to Boise and get there by 10:30 out of here. You're just going to go through Seattle to do it, but it's definitely a choice. They are increasing our flights. Right now, we're at 2 a day. We will go to 3 flights a day, August 23rd and 2 on Saturday. And then November 1st, we'll go to 3 flights a day on the Saturday, and it'll increase Monday, Thursday, and Friday will increase to 4 flights a day. That's the published schedule right now. So that is a pretty ringing endorsement from an airline stating that there's a lot of growth that they see in the community. The all-weather landing and lighting systems are the pilots getting in here. It provides, by moving the runway, we get a lot of general aviation growth that we don't have now. There's areas for people that have demand, and then it provides for what we've had through our master planning process for future forecasted needs. This is what the project looks like for planning. Everything in yellow is 2015, so this is the land, it represents land acquisition. This is the power line relocation that Gary talked about in the grant, is to move the power line to the south. This is the earthwork that we will do. We'll start with in the event that we have to do that with the FAA to protect the approach to the east end. And the last portion of that's wetland mitigation. And then you look at consecutive years here. 2016 is earthwork. This is all earthwork. Then 2017, they're prepping a pad for a runway. 2018, the runway goes in. They'll start building from this end back. They'll still be using this runway until they get about here. And then we're going to switch runways. And then 2019 is connecting taxiways, earthwork, and trying to grade everything out to where it needs to be. Timelines and the cost, the environmental assessment, again, took 2 years, cost $3.2 million. We got a clean bill of health from the FAA. We are asking for the approval of a $16 million federal grant. The match is $1.3 million for fiscal year 15, with the additional request for year-end money authority of another additional $14 million if it becomes available. Land acquisition and design, we've started that process to try to get things lined up. And construction 2016 through 2019, the target cost is $89 million. On that 8.125 match. Well, we are contingency planning for up to 119. I don't know what the price of fuel is going to be in 2018, 2019, so we're being very conservative with how we do that. That being said, we have told Mead and Hunt and looked at a bunch of other projects, and we're constantly looking. We're trying to find every efficiency that we possibly can to keep that cost down and meet the FAA's intent in the community's intent that we deliver on the project itself. This is one of the efficiencies that we're really looking at. Is the airport board talked about a terminal and approved a site for a terminal. We can end up putting a bunch of the waste earthwork in here to prep that site to save money in the future when funding is available, that this becomes a reality at some point. Maybe it's 10, 20, 30 years from now. But you prepare the site for the planning that you have, and we do our plans in 20-year increments. The funding sources, local funds 7.23 to 9.66 million. PFC funding, I have an asterisk there because it may need to be utilized for terminal items or other items that we have right now. If it's unencumbered, we're putting it towards the runway project. The state transportation departments, $250,000 a year or more for each successive year. And then the City of Pullman, City of Moscow, the City of Pullman has their resolution for a restricted fund, as well as their $2.5 million commitment is going in front of their council tomorrow. And we are working with the budget cycles for others, and the discussions are ongoing to be able to raise that match. It's a unique region. This is a unique project in a unique place. And the partnership, the vision, this place has operated for over 80 years because there is a need and a vision for the community itself and the quality of life that's enjoyed here. That cooperation to continue is vital to not only this project, but the other things that we jointly try to do between the cities to keep the quality of life that we like to have. But the future transportation, economic health of the region, commercial service is an awfully big ticket item for a lot of communities, and it is definitely something we want to be able to make sure that we keep here. Questions from the council?
Good. Was Kevin going to add something here to anything, Kevin?
I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad Tony's doing so well with this presentation. I think I'll just be here to back him up if he needs it. Thank you.
I think we're good, Tony.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, in that case, hearing nothing else, I would move to approve acceptance of the FAA grant agreement offer and execute the acceptance document for the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport AIP grant for the $16 million, as well as pre-authorize the approval to accept additional FAA year-end authorizing awards of $14 million if funding becomes available.
I'll second.
Okay. Got a motion by Art and a second by Dan to accept the FAA grant offer and execute the acceptance document for the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport AIP grant for $16 million, and the pre-authorized approval to accept an additional FAA year-end authorization award of $14,000 if the funding becomes available.
14 million, I heard.
14 million, okay, 14 million. Questions? Jim?
Do we have to, if we get the additional 14 million, do we have to have the match in hand in the bank before we can sign that grant?
What you will do is you'll authorize, or you're pre-authorizing our acceptance of that should the match be identified. So yes, we'll be given a chance, if the money is swept, we'll be given a chance at that time to accept it, but we will have to have the match available.
As I understand it now, if Moscow puts in 500,000 and Pullman puts in 650, as they're said at the meeting on Wednesday, that would cover the initial 15 million, but nothing for, we would have nothing in hand for the other 14. We'd have to identify.
Actually, as we talked about, I think at the quarterly regional breakfast meeting, a little bit in the budget cycle, last year council approved the $250,000 of additional tax money, foregone amount, and dedicated the construction growth for the $250,000 per year. Don Palmer put in front of you a resolution a few weeks ago to authorize for interfund investment, where we will take unused surplus funds or reserve funds, such as the payroll service fund, so on and so forth, to utilize that to make up the $500,000 per year commitment that the council authorized us to go ahead. In this budget year, that will be $500,000 that will be available prior to October 1st. The end of the budget year is September 30th. Once October 1st hits, then the council has budgeted, or in their proposed budget, has authorized, pending the public hearing, an additional $500,000. So there could be a $1 million of funding from the city of Moscow prior to December 31st. And Pullman's budget runs along the calendar year, and they indicated at the regional breakfast meeting that they have $650,000 that they are restricting tomorrow night, and further funds will become available. So that's in addition to the $250,000 of DOT money, Washington DOT money, that is allocated per fiscal year, the calendar year, Washington's year.
So, yeah, thanks for clearing that up, how the budget cycle would make that funding available should this other grant become available. Should clear that up, that we could potentially have the match available to us if that comes.
And if I may, by the time that this budget, by the time we would know that funding is available, which is about the last week of September is my understanding, the council will have had the public hearing on the budget, will have authorized the L2, will have passed a budget, and all that we'll be waiting for at that point is for October 1st to come around for that money to become available. Again, when you accept the funding, when you sign the agreement, which is what you're being asked to do tonight on the $16 million, that you will access that funding. It's a reimbursement grant like all federal grants. So City of Pullman will be actually writing checks for the work, seeking reimbursement. The federal government then will pay back the difference of that, I think it's 91.88% back to the City of Pullman. That additional funding will come from the match.
Well played. Thank you.
Walter?
Gary, all federal grants are not reimbursement grants. This one is.
You bet. The transportation grants we get typically are reimbursement, but I'm not sure of the other grants, EDA, that sort of thing.
Further discussion? John, I'll start to roll with you.
Excuse me, I apologize for being late. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, we have got 5 for, 1 against, so that passes. We will move on to item number 5, Pullman Moscow Regional Airport Resolution Wetland Mitigation Conservation Easement Purchase. Gary, you have the floor on this one as well.
As I indicated, this is part of Phase 1 of that project. One of the first things that needs to be done, and was done in the environmental assessment, was that there are some wetlands that need to be mitigated. Wetlands are being displaced by the airport project. There is an agreement, a conservation easement, which has been negotiated by representatives of the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport. That easement has been reviewed by Pullman City Attorney as well as Rod Hall on behalf of the City of Moscow. It does require the authorization of the sponsor, and my understanding is that Pullman has already signed this as well. So you're being asked as a sponsor for your authorization. It will be funded through the grant that you just authorized.
Yeah, Your Honor.
Yes.
We talked about this in concert with the previous item at the Administrative Committee last week, and forwarded to the council recommending approval. So I would make a motion that we do approve the proposed resolution to secure the conservation, or to authorize the airport board to secure the conservation easement.
I would second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Dan and a second by Art for the approval of the proposed resolution authorizing the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport Board to secure the conservation easement. Further question? Walter, I'll start with you.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Okay, and that went 5-1 as well, so that one, we'll move on to item number 6, which is resolution to designate Moscow Farmers Market as a smoke-free event. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony and Kevin. Kathleen, you have got the podium.
Before I get going here, I just wanted to compliment Walter. Helped with the altercation on Saturday as well. So it was good to have a city council member around.
Potential altercation, it sounded
Potential, yeah.
It was not an altercation. It was Kathleen needed a relief pitcher, I think.
So you have a resolution to monitor smoking in the Moscow Farmers Market during the hours of the market and during the boundaries of the market. The market operates every Saturday from May through the end of October. It's roughly 26 or 27 weeks, and the hours of the market are from 8 to 1. Currently, in the policies of the market for the vendors, there is no smoking with the vendors, and that's been a very respectable situation with the vendors. There hasn't been any problems at all. So it was recommended. We did hear some complaints from some customers. There's a lot of children in the market, and there's a lot of food in the market. So people have made the comparison to eating at a restaurant or shopping in a food store, and they have come to the commission has discussed it, and the commission wanted to put this forward to look at having the market become a smoke-free event. So I'm here for questions, and some of your commission members are here as well.
Dan?
We heard this also last week at the Administrative Committee and
Yep.
forwarded it for recommending approval. I did have a question, though, Kathleen and Rod, maybe. The boundaries of the market, does it, we've seen it several times, but I don't think I've ever really asked this clarification. Does the boundary go to the store, the front of the buildings, or just to the sidewalk? So are we going to have somebody walking along behind everything being able to smoke, or does it go actually up to the building face?
The boundaries encumber the sidewalk, so it would go up to the building.
Okay, thank you.
If I may recall that in most downtown, the right-of-way, unless it's an entryway into the building itself, typically the right-of-way runs all the way up to the building structure themselves.
Okay.
Relative to the boundaries, is it going to be evident to anyone who might wish to smoke where the boundaries of the farmers market actually exist, so that there is a clear delineation of where they can and can't smoke?
The plan is the commission has looked at entryway signs into the market, like gateway signs, and we would post those signs, kind of like a big A board, at each entrance. And we currently do that with the no animals, and we would just change it out and put more of a welcoming message with some of the issue like dog and no smoking on there. Yep, so we would just be changing out the entry signs, the welcome signs.
Kathleen, your staff has got its hands full on Saturdays with normal operations, with dogs in the market, handling that, and with other issues. Is this, the fact that you're here asking for this, I don't think the answer is going to be yes, it's going to be too big a burden, but I'll ask you anyway. Is this putting too much on the market staff and yourself to enforce this as well as everything else?
Well, initially, it'll be an education for staff on what's the proper procedure. We might have to have a couple quarter-pager handouts for folks or something as far as response. The other thing is the market vendors. There's been a lot of market vendors that have expressed this concern. So I think a lot of the, by letting the market vendors know, I think they can help and assist because they've helped with letting staff know about dog violations. And so I think the vendors would be very helpful. I think customers will be very helpful. So I don't see this burden strictly on the staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was the other thing too, is when this came before us at the committee meeting, this is a resolution. This isn't an ordinance. You know, I don't know that it has. It's kind of like a really strong suggestion, I guess, is what we're doing here, rather than actually outlawing smoking. But hopefully, like Kathleen says, with the vendors already, you know, having concerns about it, and other market goers will have a lot of help for Barry and his crew come Saturday to you know, put the kibosh to the smoking down there.
Your Honor.
Gary?
It is more than just, it's a statement of council policy.
Right.
And the council authorizes the resolution that created the farmer's market. Within the boundaries set by the council, what you're saying is you're converting public right-of-way to a use as a farmer's market. What this does is it authorizes the staff, if someone violates the policy, to ask that person to leave, and if that person will not leave or will not cease smoking, then they can be trespassed from the property and restrict their access to the market.
Answered my question.
Okay. John?
Yeah, with the, when we put in the no smoking in bars, a lot of these questions were brought up. And I think we found out that most people, in fact, I have not heard of anyone that has really had a problem in a bar or outside of a bar as far as the 20-foot area around the front doors. And then we put in the no dogs in the market. I've heard of no violations or complaints. I think this would be the same thing. We're telling people that we don't want you to smoke in the farmer's market. And I think that I'm going to say well over 99% of the customers or the people that go to the market are just going to put their cigarettes and their pipes and their cigars away. And so I think that even though, as Gary said, there is some muscle behind the resolution, I think more than anything else, telling people that we would really appreciate it as a city that is putting on a farmer's market, that they not smoke in that 5-hour period on a Saturday for half the year. So I don't see a problem. I support this.
Wayne?
Well, just as a comment as the liaison to the Farmers Market Commission, this didn't just come up because they thought it was a great idea. This came up through comments from patrons of the farmers market that go to it, as well as the vendors who were trying to run their business, and whether it's food or whether it's craft booths, and at times have to combat the problem with secondhand smoke. So it's been requested from not only the vendors, but the patrons too, that could we do this or could the commission look into that? So that's how that came about.
Well, I'll make a motion then,
okay.
Your Honor. Since I'm beating Art to it, that we go ahead and adopt this proposed resolution designating the Moscow Farmers Market as a smoke-free event.
I would second that then.
Okay, we got a motion by Dan and a second by Art to approve the resolution to have a smoke-free farmers market. I'll start the roll with you, John.
Aye.
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 Okay, and it passes 6-0. The
you.
resolution will move forward. Thank you, Kathleen. Item number 7, well number 10, site grading, bid results, and contract award. Les is here. We got Scott Montrager, but he is not here, I'm guessing. So Les is going to fill in for him.
Looks like another legacy of the outline software.
Okay, this is the.
Yeah, there's several. Numbering.
All right. Good evening. I will do the pinch hitting for Scott today. This is an item that he did present to the Public Works Finance Committee last week, but since I was going to be here this evening anyway, I offered to go ahead and bring this forward. The well number 10 project, as you all know, is a project that we've been working on for many years, getting to the point of creating a new large capacity, fairly deep, large diameter well on the west end of town. We have a site that we acquired about 2 decades ago now on the west end of A Street, right at the state border. And we went through a process about a year or so back for judicial confirmation to help fund the project through a DEQ, State Revolving Fund loan process. So all those things have been before the council previously. The next step that we have in the process is really the construction of the well itself and the drilling of the well. The first piece of that, if you will, is preparing the site so that it can accept a drill rig to come in and set up and actually drill a well. That will take them some time. So along that line, we have been working on how to prepare the site, and this gives you an idea of what the site looks like today. A Street is where the photographer is standing, so this is the edge of A Street here. The sidewalk on the north side of A Street. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints facility is here. This is kind of the back parking lot. And the state line is just off to the left here. So this is our site. You can see it has a bit of topography to it. It's just a bit, right about an acre, a little bit under an acre in size. But the intent here is to place a well facility on this property. So to help orient you a little bit more, here is the west end of A Street where it meets the Washington state line. This is the, again, the back parking lot of the LDS facility, and this is our well site property that we acquired some years back. That driveway that you just saw in the last picture was located right there, so we were kind of looking into this slope somewhat to the northwest. In order to provide sufficient room for the well drilling operation, ultimately for the structure that will sit over the top of the well, for other additions on the site that may include emergency power for emergency generators, potentially chlorination facilities on the site, and possibly in the future water quality treatment facilities, perhaps a filter for the water coming out of well 10. We were trying to make the pad as large as we could without getting into the need for retaining walls or getting too close to the property line, that type of thing. So we've left a fairly good setback along the property line boundaries, larger to the west, and then created what you see here is essentially the outline of the pad. That would be fairly flat, a little bit of grading to deal with drainage, but fairly flat and prepared such that it could handle the drilling operation and then all those subsequent buildings and uses that I just mentioned. What you see here in these red lines, a little bit of green lines, those would be the contours for the area would be excavating into the hillside, so this would be the top of the slope, sloping down to the pad, and it would come across fairly flat, and then again top of slope working its way down as fill down to meet the natural grade as we approach that easterly property line. Construction site entrance and ultimately the operational entrance would be located here, southwest corner of the pad, so we've got a fairly flat at-grade access into the property. One of the considerations here is in the siting of the well itself, where we'll place it. The well column could actually go anywhere in here, but we want to make sure that the well building that surrounds the well column be placed on fairly solid ground. So we want to put the building itself then in an area of excavation rather than an area of fill to help ensure that we don't have a settling of a building around a well column. So with that in mind, there's a break point roughly in the middle here of the pad where the area to the west of it would be excavation, the area to the east of it would be fill. So we would place the well generally in this area as far back as we can to the north and somewhat close to this western edge of the pad, leaving enough room that we can get access around it for maintenance. In the future, bringing in cranes if we need to access the well, to pull parts of the well out, drop motors in and out, that type of thing. So this is what the design looks like and developed by our engineering staff, Scott Bontrager leading it, our assistant city engineer in the internal operations in the engineering group. We took the project, essentially a grading project with a little bit of demolition of the existing driveway in here and a little bit of this existing sidewalk here. Took that out as a project to bid. We had two responsive bidders, Germer Construction and McCall's Classic Construction. The low bidder in this case was Germer Construction with a bid price of $66,535.45. This evening before the meeting began, I handed you an updated version of the construction agreement. The only change on this is on the second page there in the red text under Article 4, Contract Sum. We added a little bit of language here to help clarify that this contract amount is the amount I just noted, the $66,000. The way these types of contracts work, they are on a bid item. It's not a lump sum, so they're on a bid item method. So we measure the amount of material moved, amount of work done. They're paid on a unit price for the amount of work that they accomplish. So this price may vary up or down a bit depending on what those quantities end up being at the end of the job. But we just wanted to clarify going in that this is the contract amount and then that the provisions within the rest of the specification document, which are part of the contract, will determine ultimately what that final payout is. Typical with all of our construction projects that have a line items and individual item bids, things that are not lump sum projects. Okay? So that's the only change that is in that contract, and with that, I would try to answer any questions you might have.
Dan.
Les, looking through, the things kind of match up pretty good, but there's a real discrepancy in the clearing and grubbing. Did they kind of give any explanation for that, for the difference there, or?
So you're referring to the bids between the two different firms?
Plus the
on that line item?
Less than the estimate, too.
Right. We had the engineer's estimate in there, 0.7 acres of site, so roughly $3,500 was our estimate. We had bids of $514 versus $3,640. Low bidder being the $514. A lot of times it just depends on how the contractor wants to put their pricing into their bid items. It's an interesting process. Anytime you do bid item type work like this, as you know, you've done these a lot. Sometimes they'll put a little more into mobilization, or they'll put more into the earthwork and less into another item. And they approach it differently. And so that's sometimes where you see those kind of discrepancies. I don't know that we have any specific knowledge of why those particular item or that particular item was that much different between the two contractors. There are some others in there that you look at. Certainly the excavation at $33,000 versus $50,000. Obviously, they looked at it in a little different way. They've got different costs for their equipment, insurance, all those types of things that weigh into those kind of numbers. So I really can't give you an explanation as to why, but it's not uncommon.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Les? Walter?
Les, is this storm drainage built in A Street now?
There is storm drainage built in A Street. I believe the nearest portion of the system is approximately right in here, and then it flows. Well, there's a section that flows south, believe it or not, and then there's up at the intersection. There's another section that flows down Warbonnet.
So there are inlets in this part of A Street?
There are catch basins in this area, particularly at the intersection, and then on the south edge, flowing down through the. Let's see what's there. There's the hotel and the Goodwill. There's a system that runs down through that area as well.
Well, I would move that we accept a low bid from Germer Construction and award the contract in the amount of $66,535.45 to construct the project, as well as authorizing staff approval of construction change orders in the amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
Second that.
Okay, we've got a motion by Art and a second by Jim to accept the bid by Germer Construction and award of the amount $66,535.45 to construct this project along with staff's up to 10% agreement or whatever, however you word that.
Right there.
You got it right on your sheet, so I'm good with it. Other questions before we
Well,
start?
my only question is, could we have an addendum put on this that would require Larry Germer himself to operate a piece of equipment?
The pricing might go up if we do that.
Well, there goes the 10% overrun.
Well,
His wages are going to be way too high, John.
Okay,
I don't think we can afford.
Okay, if we
I'll
can't
start to-
afford him, then
I'll
we'll.
start to roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay, that's passed.
Your Honor, if I may, I would like to thank Walter for taking a look at the contract. We made a few changes on there regarding unit prices and lump sums, so appreciated that insight.
Thank you, Walter, for your expertise. Well, we're coming to the end of our meeting tonight. We've got reports. I'd ask council, we are going to have an executive session tonight, so if you could keep your remarks brief on your reports, we can move right along. I'll start with you, Dan.
Well, just have a report from the admin committee. We did everything either in the consent agenda or regular agenda that was on our committee agendas, other than we had a report and we met the Moscow Poet Laureate, and Kathleen helped me. Tiffany Midge.
She was good.
And she was good. She's I had the honor of being on the selection committee with the arts commissioners, and twinkle might have been the wrong word, but she's got a little bit of a tweak, a little spark there when she reads her poetry that really set it off and set her apart from the other candidates. So I look forward to seeing what she's going to come up with for us over the next few years. That's all I got.
Okay, Art.
Nothing's gone on in the past couple weeks for me. I've got Sustainable Environment tomorrow, got URA on Wednesday, and Fair and Affordable Housing is on the 6th of August. I'll have reports then.
Okay, Walter.
The only thing I had, or a couple of things I had, other than the large events that all the council people attended, PBAC did have a special meeting back on the 7th of this month to confirm the selection of an engineering firm to begin study of the data that we have available to us regarding alternative sources of water for the Palouse. They did not have a regular meeting this month, but they did have that special meeting. The other thing was that I invited myself to a meeting between staff and ITD to talk about the North Entranceway project, the beautification project, and was pleased to see that work is moving along with hopefully some plantings to occur in the latter part of September.
Thank you, Walter. Wayne.
Well, I don't have any reports, as I took a little vacation time last week, missed a few meetings, but I think they carried on just fine without me. There is a Smart Transit meeting as well as Personnel Committee meeting tomorrow, which of course I'll be attending. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Very good. Jim.
I went to the Pathways Commission meeting on Tuesday, and Chairman Jonathan Graydon took us all on a bicycle ride on the pathway from Mountain View Park over to the Berman Creekside Park to show off the new sharrows and the pathway through the city that involves less hills than you might think. And the only anomaly that I saw was that the creek is backed up, so there's a pond underneath the bridge at Highway 8, so it'd be somewhat difficult to construct a underpass right there now, which is kind of in my plans for this summer. And so we need to clear out the creek there somehow and improve it so it flows normally.
It wasn't a beaver dam by any chance.
It could have. It's downstream from there.
That's natural habitat, you understand.
I understand they're taking the beavers out of the creek over by the Berman Park because they're damming up the creek, or by the Heron's hideout. They're making them move on.
Move on.
Or not live under a dam or something. But that's all I have.
Okay, John.
I really don't have anything. However, I would suggest that on Friday afternoon, if you've got the time, the Lily and Otness Park over here by the old Dumas Seed is going to be dedicated, and her only child, Bob, is coming up for his 50th class reunion, so he should be here for that. And that also is my 50th class reunion. However, Bob actually graduated. They just gave me a 12-year certificate.
Participation certificate.
You know, you've been here long enough. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you, John. With that, I had an airport board meeting on July the 8th. We had a regional breakfast, as Gary mentioned, last Wednesday on the 15th. And also Rendezvous in the Park on Friday night the 17th to help kick that off. And, of course, our own Councilor Jim Bowen was him and his team put on a wonderful event there this year. It was very, very nice. So you can take a bow on that, Jim. Your staff.
It was quite financially successful this year in spite of the cancellation. So we're happy about that.
Yeah, it was a very well-ran, excellent event. Gary?
Thank you. We have a joint meeting with the council and mayor of the city of Pullman on the 22nd, Wednesday, at 6:30 at Krugel Park in Pullman at their invitation. So look forward to seeing you all then.
Gary, and you'll be getting directions for everybody how to get
Absolutely.
to this park.
We'll have a map for
okay. Very nice. Well, with that, I would like to adjourn and go to executive session per Idaho Code 74206 for executive session. This meeting will not resume once the executive meeting is over, and we'll take a 5-minute recess while we're taken.
Do you need a motion and second for that, please?
Yes, we do.
I'd make a motion, we adjourn to executive session.
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
5-minute recess, it's 8:13. We'll reconvene at 8:18.